Purple Belt is a strange place to land. Not because of the techniques or the expectations, but because of what it represents. In the learning world, people call it conscious competence. The idea came from 4 stages of competence model where you finally know what you're doing, and more importantly, you understand why you're doing it. At the same time, it's not automatic yet. You still have to think your way through it. At 52, I'm about 7 years on the mats, and that hits me a little different, right? Because it's not just about what I can do anymore. It's also what I carry when I walk into the room, into the gym. I feel like there's a level of responsibility here that isn't assigned and isn't formal, but it's understood. Rickson Gracie talks about this level as a deeper understanding of strategy, not just moves and sequences, but timing, pressure, awareness, and intention. And when I think about leadership, whether it's on the mats, in a team, or at home, it starts to look the same. You stop asking, what do I need to learn? And you start asking, what do I need to model? Welcome to You-Jitsu, where we use Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a lens for discipline, resilience, and growth on and off the mats. I'm Kevin Pinnell. Let's get to work. So after that intro, I want to come back to something simple. When people talk about Purple Belt, it's usually about techniques or what you should know by then. But over time, it starts to feel more like a leadership role. Now, I'm a new Purple Belt, but I've been around the life, I guess, for a bit. And I was a blue belt for quite some time, and I've just been in leadership roles for a while. So leadership as a Purple Belt isn't necessarily official or assigned unless maybe you're taking over the kids class or you're asked to teach something. But I think it's something that you should make show up, and that does show up as you mature in your jiu-jitsu and your friendship with the people you train with. Right? And there's 5 things that tend to define leadership in my perspective on the mats at this level. And it's not perfect and not every day, but things that I think are worth paying attention to. The first is setting the standard, right? When I look around most gyms, the people who stick with it usually do a few simple things really well. They show up a little early if they can, especially versus older grapplers, right? Enough time to stretch, help open up if need be, or just not rush into that first round, right? Warm-up rounds or warm-ups. It's a small thing, but over time it becomes part of how people are seen, right? A lot of people remember getting their blue belt and thinking, all right, I made it. Then someone newer starts giving them problems and it hits, right? This thing doesn't really work like that. Blue belt tends to be where most of the ups and downs happen. People take time off, come back, feel sharp one day, completely off the next. And if they stay with it long enough, there's usually a shift where the focus moves away from the belts and more toward just showing up and training. I stepped away 3 times myself: surgery, panic, family stuff. And each time coming back felt harder than the last, but also more necessary. There's something about leaving it unfinished that doesn't sit right. And each time you come back, you start to notice the people who kept showing up while you were gone, they got better. Not because they were more talented, some were, but mostly because they just stayed in it. Right? Renzo Gracie said it simply, a champion is just someone who didn't quit. So at this level, leadership starts to look like consistency. Just being there enough that someone newer can look up and think, all right, this is what staying in it looks like. Second is control the room, not the ego, right? So leadership shows up in rounds, not necessarily speeches or how you drill, how hard you drill, how hard you don't drill perhaps. And you'll see it when someone new comes in, strong, athletic, maybe a little nervous, goes full speed right away, right? This happens everywhere. There's a round recently that like a lot of forward pressure, grabbing, diving in, but no structure behind it, right? A few years ago, I probably would have matched it and been like, oh, all right. And just, said, we're going at it. And at this point, right, I'm not trying to match a 20-year-old's pace. I'm trying to control it. Frames, distance, positioning, then taking something simple when it opens up, an ankle pick, right? From there, settling in, controlling position, letting the initial burst of energy burn off. That's what people mean by cooking, right? You get someone to a position, or maybe that's happening to you, and they're just not letting you move, and they're putting that weight on you. Right. And you are smashing a little bit because some people need to chill out, especially in the college town where I'm at. Right. I see it a lot, and it's where my leadership comes in. Right. And a good test to know that I should be able to handle the situation and also know when to ease off. Right. With new people, smaller training partners, or someone dealing with an injury, the approach changes. Right. The goal isn't to win that round. Right. It's to help them keep coming back. A man named John Wooden talked about small things done well over time. Right? Sometimes on the mats, that just means helping someone feel like they belong long enough to stick with it. So the advice can stay simple. Frame and side control, build a stable base, keep the elbows in. And I think that's enough. Sometimes new folks get really overwhelmed, and that's true whether we're teaching them jiu-jitsu, how to ride a bike, how to plan a project. Too much too soon is overwhelming. 3, let's pay attention to the details that maybe don't show up on the video or in class. right? And this is where things start to feel a bit different, right? What Rickson Gracie calls that invisible jiu-jitsu. It's about maybe doing more and more, but less better, if that makes sense, right? At this point, it's not about being explosive necessarily, though that's very helpful. It's about being in the right place a little sooner, getting a knee back and for regard instead of panicking, holding position instead of chasing submissions, right? Adjusting pressure instead of forcing movement. And over time, things start to feel a little smoother. But every once in a while, you get a reminder, right? I went back to the gym where I started, rolled with another purple belt, and he shut me down completely. Efficient, smooth, always a step ahead, answers for everything. It was a good reset reminder that there are levels inside of levels to jiu-jitsu, right? No one truly arrives and then that's just it. Like Marcelo Garcia talks about focusing on small details over time. And that's what this is, right? Paying attention to those details that don't necessarily always show up in the video. They're just kind of there. You get that muscle memory. 4, help others without making it about you, right? At this point, whether you want it or not, you're part of the learning environment. Carlos Machado said purple belt should change your spirit, not just your skill, right? And a lot of that shows up in how you help other people. No big speeches necessarily, no overcoaching, because we don't want to be the chatty person who's always like, oh, you should do this and blah, blah, blah. That's wrong, right? Maybe just small corrections, encouragement. Honestly, you can tell when people have no idea or they're trying too hard, or maybe they're not trying hard enough to help them push themselves, right? Arms out, there's a lesson. Neck exposed, that's a lesson. Base is weak, that gets exposed too. Controlled, safe, real, and as purple belts, we should be able to help people with that. I was a dad before I started training jiu-jitsu, right? And that perspective helps whether I want to or not. It's just the dad me. I want people to learn. I also want them to stay. And when you zoom out, that idea goes beyond the mats. Let's look at Chuck Norris, rest his soul. A lot of people grew up watching him without realizing the background, right? Competitor, he was a badass dude, a bare knuckle karate champion. He was also a black belt in jiu-jitsu under Carlos Machado. But what stood out is how he carried himself. Discipline, consistency, presence. He showed leadership that I think all of us could emulate well. Number 5, do the work no one sees. This one's pretty simple, but it might be the most important. There's still work to do outside of class. Recovery, reflection, just taking a minute to think about what happened. For me, it's cold plunge, quick after action reviews, right? Nothing too complicated, just what worked, what didn't, what needs attention. I noticed something over time, right? On days I don't train or move, I'm just not as steady, right? I'm not as focused, not as patient. It feels like I didn't earn the day, right? Good old Jocko Willink talks about discipline being freedom. And there's definitely something to that. So do hard things early also tends to carry everything else throughout the day. It just gives it a perspective where, oh, this issue is not really that hard to work through. So if you're new and you're feeling a little lost, that's totally normal. If you've been in it a while, you're getting close to this level, just understand what starts to come with it. It's not about getting better necessarily. It's a lot for me and for others about helping other people stay in it long enough for it to work. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be complicated. Breathe when things get hard. Frame when you're under pressure. Elbows in. Keep showing up, even if it's not clicking. And just survive long enough to learn something. If this episode helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a review if you're willing. It helps more than you think. Follow me on X and Instagram at PANNELLKG, PanelKG. For more on leadership, life, and the long game, visit peopleprocessprogress.com. Until next time, breathe, frame, keep showing up, and survive.